Can you all see this? We're improvising. We're doing what we can best. So briefly, most of you know who we are, what we do. Monterey Bay Economic Partnership serves 3 counties, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito, and we're looking to create a thriving economic region in partnership with all of you. So we're roughly about a decade older coming up on that. I share all of this so you understand why we're also part of the Uplift Central Coast California Jobs First initiative. Next. Our 3 major buckets, our strategic initiatives are in housing. Many of you work with our housing staff when we were looking at RENA numbers, the housing elements, what is our North Star in housing? That's housing production of all kinds, from market rate, affordable housing, permanent supportive policies around that. Second is broadband digital equity initiatives. Actually, we were just in Sacramento yesterday talking about the massive divide that continues to exist, especially in our regions such as ours. We are still needing to have sound programs of digital literacy, infrastructure, access, and affordability. And so there's a lot of buzz and conversation about how do we encourage our internet service providers to provide affordable connectivity, given that affordable connectivity program is sunsetting in about a month or so. So a lot of buzz, a lot of advocacy there. So we also run the Central Coast Broadband Consortia, bringing folks together to talk about broadband digital equity issues. The third prong is, as an economic partnership, what does economic development and economic growth look like? Yes, the typical sort of business recruitment, retention, workforce development, how do we engage our industry leaders, our educational partners, and everything in between. So workforce is really sort of important and centered in that. And what does high-paying, high-quality jobs look like? And this pretzel-looking diagram is really about the intersection, interconnectedness. When we look at economic growth and economic development, it's all of that. It is housing. Where does our labor live? Where do our people live? Are they connected? Do they have access to online resources for education, job application, telehealth visits? So all of that's interconnected. And you see that sort of intersection in the middle with the triple bottom line of equity, environment, inclusive economics. That said, then we go right into the next slide, which is around who is Uplift? What is Uplift project that these 3 organizations up and down the Central Coast are working on? So several years back, when the governor was looking to create, at that time it was called the California Economic Resilience Fund, trying to create an inclusive economic development plan centered around people, centered around different voices that are often not at the table when we talk about economic development. Typically, you have planners and industries and other folks crunching numbers and projecting and forecasting what the region needs. That is an important aspect. Likewise, we have to make sure and center the voices in our region and our community. So back in November of 2021, it was signed into legislation, the SURF legislation, specifically about how do we regionally have economic engines that drive and speak to that specific region. And so Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, REACH, headquartered in San Luis Obispo, and Ventura EDC, which is in Ventura, we came together and decided to name ourselves the Uplift Central Coast Coalition around inclusive economic development, and understanding that our Central Coast region also has these really unique assets about who we are, what we do. We're more than just our hospitality and tourism and our ag assets. There's a lot more going on here. So we applied and we landed the $5 million planning grant. Next slide. We landed that grant that is really about, again, the entire 6 counties, stretching from Santa Cruz down to Ventura. The $5 million planning grant is to create and write an inclusive economic development that speaks to all 6 of our counties. Our preliminary, and if we go next, now it's no longer called SURF. Remember, in November it was called Community Economic Resilience First, November 2021. Fast forward now, it has been renamed next to California Jobs First, is what we call it. And we're next. And so there's 2 phases to California Jobs First, the planning phase and the implementation phase. We're currently in the planning phase. And the state, in its wisdom, took this entire state of California and carved it into 13 regions. We are one of the 13 regions funded to create an inclusive economic development plan. Part of that planning is to have inclusive stakeholder engagement. On the next slide, it shares sort of our North Star of what is the purpose, what is the outcome. It's, you know, a sort of convergence of what does equity, economic opportunities, and sustainability look like for centering jobs, good, high-paying, high-quality jobs in all of our regions in California. But all of the regions are not going to look the same. And when we look at economic development and growth, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Every region has its unique assets. How do you build off of that? Next. So we are now like sort of the phase 2 of the process, which is community-informed data analysis. What that really means is we conducted listening sessions in this first phase of the California Jobs First. I have to continue to remind myself I'm not to say CERF, but it's called California Jobs First. We just happen to call ourselves Uplift and not California Jobs First, but they are interchangeable. That said, we're now in the phase of conducting soon in the next coming weeks, and that's where we wanted to really get out here fast and soon and quickly to solicit your engagement and involvement. Is that in the coming weeks we will be engaging industry leaders and having specific roundtable discussions and topics. In our first tranche of data gathering, we really spoke to the community. We also funded community-based organizations and had some key findings, much of which affirms what we already know around housing and broadband and affordable child care. And by late summer, early fall, we are to then submit the second round of our report on what the findings were between the community, the industry, and what we're proposing as an inclusive economic development plan. And as I do a time check, we're exactly at 1:30. I think it's probably best for me to stop here and take questions. Otherwise, I've got another probably 15 more slides, and I don't think I could do justice to that and speak this fast. But we can try to, just go move forward and see. But I would keep going. These are just kind of guiding principles. On this particular slide, if we hold for a moment, we often get the question of who's involved, who's represented from our community. Actually, Christina is part of one of our steering committees representing the northern region, as well as Diana Ortiz from a Youth Alliance. We tried really hard to make sure that folks were either self-nominated or were nominated as part of the governance structure. It's really important for us to have community engagement across the 6 counties. Part of it's prescriptive. The state does ask and require we have certain demographics covered. We have labor at the table, for example. We have BIPOC communities, work enforcement boards, worker centers, economic development, city, county, the full mix, academic institutions. So we've tried really hard to create a governance structure where there's a vision committee that oversees the entire 6-county region, and then 2 steering committees, one in the northern region, and which Christina sits on, and one for the southern region. And they do meet from time to time to discuss what's overlapping, what's different. So there was intentionality of making sure that all of the counties and all of the voices are heard and centered and represented. And as MBEP, that serves the northern Tri-County region, we're very sensitive to making sure our regions are fully represented. The Santa Cruz, Monterey County, and San Benito are represented in the population, and the data, and the conversations, and the plans moving forward. So hence why the deliberate intentionality, and for me to also pause as how it's currently structured. And now we're at a phase we really want to engage and have the next phase of conversations. We also released our first set of findings, which I really think we would love to come back and do a little bit deeper dive of what the outcomes were. Meanwhile, you can go to the website and download it. It's 3 parts, an executive summary, there's also a narrative report, and a data book where you can actually toggle and look at and play with what are the indicators for San Benito, say, versus Santa Cruz or Ventura, San Luis Obispo. Next. This again is just a snapshot of what I'm talking about for the vision and the sub-regional committees. Next. We are currently on in between Regional Plan 1 and Part 2 is kind of the current phase. Next. And we'll just scroll all the way to the end so I can open up for questions. So I'm going to pause. That's a lot. It's all over the place. But bottom line is this is a project. The Uplift Central Coast Coalition is a project to continue to talk about and iterate around economic development and economic growth through the lens of the 6 counties. And how can we work together? What do we leverage in our areas? And how do we leverage the next tranche of resources coming down the state in the implementation phase, where we as counties and as constituents and key stakeholders can advocate for key projects in our area, because we know our regions and our areas best. So I'll pause there. Thank you for indulging us in this really super fast, rapid presentation. And I'm happy to come back. Or we did a study session last week at the foundation, which was lovely, around some of the issues around inclusive economic development, specifically the report that MBEP and UC Santa Cruz did together. We're happy to do something similar where we can do a community study session and dive a little bit deeper in the regional report. So happy to come back and do that. So I'll stop there.
Heather from MBEP.
Thank you, MBEP, for this report. Quick report. I was hoping Christina could maybe get a copy of the slides and email them out. I see the website is on the agenda, but if the slides are on the website, that would be great, because I would really like to review all this information. Good information. Thank you.
You've got it.
I'd actually love to see him come back and give a full presentation.
Would you like to do this? Our next meeting is April 4th. We're going to have a COP meeting. Would you be up to a special meeting? And would you like that morning, lunch, or afternoon?
Morning or lunch?
Morning or lunch? Okay. We'll coordinate with the MBEP team to make that